Hello, it's Duncan, Chief Developer at Gilded Rose Magical Item Store, I suppose. Here again, and here to talk about exciting new developments in our stock control system. Well, last time we thought we'd finished listing the stock in a browser for printing. Unfortunately, well, we showed this, it's on the screen at the moment, to our customer, and they said that can't survive. And to be honest with you, we were in a bit of a rush to finish it. It was late on a Friday, and we hadn't obviously looked at it very hard. And also, when we came to review our code, we saw that actually we had messed up a bit here. Here you can see we had these table header tags, but we finished with this table. Finished with a TD. We didn't finish our search and replace properly. I noticed it when I was editing the video. Oddly, it doesn't seem to affect anything in terms of the rendering, which is interesting. It's interesting because if we have a look, you can see that page source actually still has the TD in it, so that's evidently wrong. But when we inspect here, you can see that actually our table header has been fixed up. So Chrome, when it was parsing this HTML, obviously decided to fix it up. It did enter another space here as part of its fixing up, which I don't understand, but bless it for at least humouring us. So today, instead of getting on with the next thing, we're actually going to do a little bit of tidying up. It's a good time. I'm not sure we've got technical debt, but we've got a few things we sort of made work expediently, shall we say. So the first thing we're going to look at is, well, fixing that issue. And so we've got our template source here, and then in our test we effectively repeat that. We say we expect to see this thing rendered. And we can fix this, we can make it work by changing the thing that we expect, and then changing the actual, but every time we have to edit it in two places. It's a bit of a pain. So we can solve this sort of problem with something called approvals tests, and HTTP4K has such a thing built in. So let's just go and find out what we do. First thing we need to do is bring in a little bit of library. So let's go to build.gradle, and so we want something like that, but it wants to be test implementation, and then let's just have a little reorg. We don't need that. And then let's take out test implementations. They're obviously not the primary thing, even for test-driven developers, so we'll just reorganize that. Okay. Now if we make sure Gradle has imported that, and then go and have a look again at how we use this, what we do is we extend our class, our test class, we add an annotation to it, which is extend with approval test, and then each of our test methods gains access to an approver. And this approver, we can say things like assert approved, and in this case that some response is what we saw. So let's just paste those in ourselves. So back to our list stock tests. Paste it into there, do our imports, and then here we'll gain access to an approver. Now we can say, given a response as we have here, we can say approver assert approved, and the one I think we're going to go with here is that the response is approved and this is an expected status. In our old test, well, here we weren't actually saying anything about the status, so we can take that opportunity and we basically just give it the response and say, oh, and by the way, that needs to have OK as its status. Okay. So let's run that and see what we get. We've got all our tests here. Now, what happens is our tests fail because we have nothing approved, but HTTP4K writes this file here, list stock list test, so it's got the name of this test class, list stock, so it's got the name of the function, and actual to say this is what actually happened. And when we look at that, Well, what actually happened is what we expect to happen, which is our previous expected. So we can delete that. We don't need it anymore. And if expected is okay, with a little help, we can say approve that. There's a plugin for IntelliJ. And what that does is create a file. You can see it here, list.doc test approved, replacing the actual version, which we can commit into Git. And if we run this test now, you see this test passes. If we were to mess it up somehow, so if we would go back to server and say, change something in there and run it, then it would fail again, and we could see the difference here, and you can see that it failed with the change that we made. So we could, at that point, we can decide either that's a change we want to have happened, in which case we can approve the file, or that's not a change we wanted to happen, in which case we can fix our code. This time we'll fix our code by doing that, run the tests, and we're golden. The test passes. I think it should delete that file, but we'll do it ourselves. Okay, so let's just commit that with as introduce approvals tests. So having done that, this now allows us to either go and edit that actual file to say, sorry, that approved file to say what we want something to look like. So we can do that and say, actually that was wrong. What we wanted was this. So we can edit that, run the tests. They will fail. We can go and fix up server, make that pass, or we could go the other way around. We could fix up the server and then just approve it. Either way, we've made that change. Although I expected that to pass. Table header, table header. Let's just see what the problem is. And now we have a small issue here about blank lines being added or not. Irritatingly, IntelliJ adds a blank line here when it saves these files. So I think the easiest way around is just to go to the server and say our template is going to have an extra line in it. Sometimes get these problems with approvals tests where we have to get them stable in some sort of way, but that's nice and stable. Okay, so that's just a tiny little change, which is fix HTML. But when we're there, this actual file we don't want, so we can delete it. The approved file goes into our source control so that it's available for everyone to run their tests against. Okay, good. Now this allows us to speed up our feedback cycle when we are messing around with HTML, when writing HTML. Because what we want to do now is we want to make a better job of this. We want to center these somehow. We want to make it look nice. And making it look nice, we want a quick feedback. We want to just be able to refresh things in the browser, see them, and then when they're right, we just want to say, okay, that's right, that's good, let's go with that. Let's say that's what we wanted. Another way we can speed this feedback cycle is, at the moment, if we make a change and want to see it in the browser, we've actually got to rebuild and rerun our server in order to see any changes we make. What we can do now is we're going to use HTTP4K's proper templating support. So we would currently, at the moment, using handlebars raw, which is to say, in our server over here, we are actually creating a handlebars object here, com github jnac handlebars, and we're compiling a template ourselves. Now, HTTP4K can do that for us. And so what we're going to do is say, instead of handlebars here, we're going to say handlebars templates. And we can ask HTTP4K to hot reload for us from somewhere. And we could say hot reload from source main. Now we can't compile, but let's not worry about that. Take that away for now. And if we did use this, then we could just, in fact, say, instead of asking the root template here, we could ask the handlebars to render our object. And when we look at what handlebars like to do, it's a template renderer, and that's view model to string. And the reason this isn't compiling is because we were passing a map before. A map. What's a view model? Let's just go and have a look. So let's ask templates. This is all a bit icky, isn't it? But what's templates? Oh, I don't know. Let's go back and have a look at the documentation. And here you can say, it says, take the renderer, which is our templates, apply it to view model, where this is our view model. It's a data class person, but it has to be a type view model, which is an interface. Don't really understand why it needs to be that, but let's just do what it asks us to do, which is create a data class rather than a map. What will that data class look like? Data class, we'll call it stock list view model to make it clear that it's only something for this interaction. And if we had one of these, it would have the first two items in our map, the top level items in our map, which are now and items is stock map. So first of all, we'll have now, and we want this to be a string because we want to make sure we do all our formatting up front. So this is going to be now is a string, and items, and that was a list of a map of string to string. This map of string to string was for each item that we separated out into the rows, into the columns, and the list one for each. And we remember that we needed to make this a view model. Who knows why? Having got that, we can now paste that into there. We could put that, and that will compile. Right, let's try running that. Remembering that our tests are actually trying to render, so we should find any issues. And this says, okay, com gilded rose stock list view model not found, no template. But at least it's telling us where it wants it. Well, it's telling us it wants it in com gilded rose stock list view model, and we said it was going to be in source main. So let's go over here. This is source main com gilded rose. So inside here, we're going to say we want a new file. That file is going to be called stock list view model, and these are handlebars templates which have an HBS extension. We'll add that. Now if we run, test will fail. I suspect we need source, yes. So this is going to be loading from source main Java. I think, let's try that. Okay, now we have managed to render, but we've managed to render an empty document, which is understandable because our template was empty. What should our template look like? Well, the answer is this template source here. So let's go and take this, cut it out of here, that's unused anyway, and put it into our template. We can just indent it a little bit more sensibly. IntelliJ supports handlebars if we install some plugin, but let's just run that like that. And now it still doesn't pass, but it doesn't pass only because our expected output doesn't have the indent. So you can see we're very close. And the beauty of approval test is when we're close enough, we can say approve, run again, and now we're working. Fantastic. Now, why is this helpful? Well, it's helpful because we can now run main. And if we view in our browser and then make changes, so we could say name banana, providing we save that, if we go over here and reload, you can see the changes happen without us having to restart the server. So this will now allow us to iterate quickly on our visuals in order to make quick progress there without having to restart the server every time. Right. So what do we want this to look like? We can edit our handlebars template to make it right, move everything away, and well, we won't spend too long on this, but they said they'd be happy if we could just make these line up a bit better. What does lining up a bit better mean? Well, we could mess around with CSS, but I think we'll say style equals text align colon center. If we just save that, come over here, refresh, see whether it works. That works. Didn't want center though, now we look at it, we wanted right. Save, refresh. So now we've got a nice quick turnaround time. Give us save, reload, and we're done. Splendid. Now, that may work, but of course we've changed our actual output. When we run our tests, the approved won't be the actual, but we can click and see the difference. We left in banana. Look, isn't that a good job we checked? But having checked, we can see that the other changes were the changes we wanted. So we can stop that. We can take out banana. This is in the template, so we're doing it in the right place. Rerun our tests. Now, that is what we want it to look like. Final test we can run in here. See that that's nicer. Everyone's happy. We approve. The tests run. And now we can commit. So what's happened? We changed our server to use the better handlebars support with hot reload. And we have a difference here of what we approved, which has some better indenting and some better styling. And we have our template, the handlebars file, which is as we expect. So this is, I mean, the actual fix as far as the customer is concerned is better table formatting, but we did that through adding in handlebars. So it's quite late at night, as you may be able to see here. So almost done for the day, but just before we do, we'll have a little look around, see what we could make a little bit nicer. In particular, this server is now, well, it's got an empty, we forgot there, so we could tidy that up. But it's also a sort of mix of, these routes and formats. All the mess of our server is happening in here now. So, and also, I don't know whether you remember, but when we look back in our tests, let's close that. Let's list stock tests. So I'm going to split those and move them right so we can see them. These make a server and then go and fetch the routes out of it. Main creates a server and calls start on it. So there are two concerns here. One is the routes and one is the managing of the server. And we should probably separate those out because that would mean that we didn't have to scroll up and down this file. In order to do that, then we want routes to be a separate concern than server, and what we're going to do is we're going to extract a function here. We're just going to change the order of those back to stock and clock as they were before and say OK. Now that's quite handy because this was in an init statement expression, it's had to pass in the two parameters here. And that's especially handy because it means that we can take this out of here and into here, and providing we move handlebars down with it, then this is now separate from our server, which is nice for us. So our server is now just concerned with routes and sort of putting everything together. Now, so let's tidy that. Just check that hasn't actually broken anything. It hasn't, which is good for us. So now, instead of going building a server in our tests and getting the routes out of it, we can call these routes directly. So routing HTTP handler is a rubbish name. We'll call it routes. And so here we could say this is server is routes if routes were public, but it is now. Now we don't need to mess around with client being the server routes because that was what we're now building directly. So we could fix this by saying that the client is the server. So now the client is the server, we can just inline the client. That seems to leave an odd here, but we can now just call this not server but routes. So we've got some routes from the stock. Remember, this is passing in our clock. Clock's not a good name. I think we thought calendar was better. Don't know why we didn't rename it. And our tests still pass. And if we had other tests, then we could build them. We could maybe move this out into as a fixture of our tests or whatever. Okay, we're almost done though. We can now move this into the constructor. What we're trying to do is to separate out. The server doesn't need to know anything about the stock or the clock, it just needs to know routes. So we can move this into the constructor. A bit of bad formatting. And then, well, we may be able to see it, may not, but let's pull main over here. There might be nicer ways to refactor this, but I'm just going to say that we could just pass routes, stock and clock into there if this didn't have these two parameters. And then as for the clock, well, we've lost we just undo that. You see that the clock we were calling here had a default, which is local tech now. So let's reinstate that to there. There would be other ways to make that refactor that didn't break things. Right. And then we can get rid of this because that will just be calling the default. Now you might be looking at this server and asking whether it is earning its keep. It's a good question to ask. It's quite handy to have something that encapsulates how to start the server and how to stop it. So you pass something around that you start and stop. We're not actually stopping anything here, but I think maybe this is earning its keep. What isn't earning its keep though is all these other things in this file. So let's just take those, and if we say we want to take the date format, handlebars, in fact everything that isn't a server, and move them into a file that we'll call routes. Add that. Now our server is only concerned with the nice servery things. We might now see that we should be able to pass it the port that it wants to start on and those sort of things from main. And we have gained a file which is routes. A little bit of a mess, so let's tidy it up a bit. It has this public entry point. It has the parts that were buried inside our server are now just free floating values at the top level. That's all fine for now. And we have our utilities in here, which is good. I think that's probably all we need. Later on, as our routes expand, then we'll probably end up partitioning this further so that we'd have one route and another route in different files so that this didn't just get longer and longer. But for now, this is fine, I think. So one last run of the tests. That's good. And one last commit. This is extract routes from server. And because we learnt that lesson last time, maybe we have, maybe we haven't, we will rerun main and just check that our customer will be happy with it when they see it. Reload that, and it's all good. There we go. Right. I hope you enjoyed that. I think we're now in a position to look at the next story that our customer gave us, which was when I view the stock in a browser, it should update qualities. So next episode, I think we will have a look at that. I hope you've enjoyed this quick canter through some more TDD implementation of the Gilded Rose stock program. If you have, I think you'll probably enjoy Nat Price on my book, which is called Java to Kotlin, a refactoring guidebook, which covers the way that we look at Kotlin and structure applications, as well as how to get there from your current Java. Anyway, hope you enjoyed this. Thank you very much.